Allied casualties in Normandy received the most expert medical care science can provide. Two modern treatments, penicillin and blood transfusion, have cheated death in thousands of cases.
Women have always worked, even before the war, but society never considered it proper. Once the Great Depression struck, it was not only considered improper, but also immoral. They were denounced for working and were accused of only using their money to buy luxuries for themselves, while there were men without jobs who needed to support their families. There were even laws passed that said women couldn't work if their husbands disapproved. Even when unemployment rates started getting better, women were still belittled and unequal to men.
Before World War II started, penicillin was showing great results. Alexander Fleming had everything to do with this. He was at the peak of his research when he moved from England to the United States. Penicillin was in such high demand, we had to start mass producing it. We had doctors all over the United States trying to figure out how we could ship it overseas, faster ways to make it, and what type of mold had the compounds of penicillin.
Blacks have always been treated as lesser beings throughout history, but they have been gradually treated better with each war they were involved in. However, the majority of blacks were never really able to participate in full combat within a war. Until World War II, blacks always were stuck in the backseat of combat, but some black units did get to fight in other wars. Blacks usually would work in factories, make artillery, and even took care of the injured. When all the men were sent off to war, they left the factories empty. Since they needed more workers, factories decided that hiring women would be a good temporary solution. It took many campaigns from the government to convince women to work, but by 1944, 37% of all women in America were employed. As women worked more and more, they started to realize that they could do just the same things as men and that they were just as equal. Even some men in the workforce were starting to see women as equals.
When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, we decided to fight in World War II. After this announcement, penicillin was in a higher demand than it already was. Thousands of soldiers could have died, but we figured out how to save them. Penicillin was very useful in the war. For example, if you were a soldier and you got a battle wound, doctors would wrap a penicillin dressing around it. By doing this, it increased the chances of not getting an infection and increased your survival rate. We wanted African Americans in World War II, but many of them were not able to participate in the war. But because of this, we segregated African Americans into their own units. African Americans weren't the only reason why America won the war, but it definitely did help. The Tuskegee Airmen are an all-black Air Force unit. They were the most important unit in World War II. With their help, it was possible to start the end of the war with D-Day.
D-Day was very important to end the war because it impacted the victory of the Allied forces. It gained a foothold in Normandy, France, so they could set up operations and push the Germans back to Germany. Normandy was a 50-mile-long beach split up into 5 sectors, which were Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. Each sector was assigned to a different country. On the coast of the beach were Nazi-controlled fortified bunkers with machine guns in them. There was hardly any cover on the beaches for the soldiers to hide. That is why 9,000 soldiers died or were wounded. This was a very big invasion. There were 5,000 ships and 13,000 aircraft involved in the invasion of Normandy. More than 13,000 paratroopers were dropped behind enemy lines, including the 82nd and 101st Airborne Division from the U.S. and the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion from other Allied troops.
After the war, the way women were viewed went back to the way it was before. Even though many people forgot about women's contributions, the women who worked in those factories didn't, and they showed the way for others who wanted to work. Women still work to this day, and it's all because of the women of World War II.
After the war, penicillin sparked many other medical advances. The first was the skin graft. They took healthy skin and put it on burned or exposed areas. It also sparked the continuation of blood transfusions. Even though blood transfusions were used in World War II, it made so many medical advances after the war thanks to penicillin. Penicillin is the basis of most common medication. Without penicillin, we would not have the medications we have today.
After the war, blacks were still not given full respect, but the civil rights movement helped them not be as segregated. The war did help the blacks get some respect because it showed that they could do things that white people could do. It proved to whites that blacks weren't just slaves or workers. It showed that they were soldiers and men too. Blacks helped win World War II, made military today different because now any race can be in the military and they aren't segregated units.